Welcome to the Mindfully Masculine podcast with Charles and Dan, where we take a conscious, holistic, and direct approach to relationships, mental health, and self-improvement. For additional content, visit our website at mindfullymasculine.com. And to interact with us, our guests, and your fellow listeners, join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook.
Good morning, Charles.
Howdy, Dan. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm just starting my timer for Rule 11, and I don't know what it maxes out at, but hopefully we don't hit that number. Because holy cow, this rule goes on forever. So let's do the fun stuff first. What's new with you?
Oh, what's new with me? I am going to finish up my 5th week of the Way Better 5K run.
Nice.
Training for that run this week, and I am doing the longest run for the 5K is actually a 4-mile run, and I have to do that today.
Yeah, that's a long time.
So I have been running outside every day except for one. Due to the weather. Today I may need to do the gym, but it is such a difference running outside, even on a flat trail versus running on a treadmill. And I really didn't appreciate the difference until I did this. And I've been doing this for 5 weeks now.
Yeah, it is a big difference. And I remember when that 4-mile run, man, holy cow, that it takes a long time, especially if you're slow like me. And it's like, man, when's this thing going to end?
Yeah, I don't know if I talked about this on the podcast, but the one thing that was interesting to me was just, I don't go crazy hard on it. So I'm not, right. I never really exert myself, my cardio wise anyway, but mentally it's a challenge. Like you said, it's like, when's this thing going to be over? And even with music going and everything else, my mind is like, okay, how much? And my mind is constantly recalculating. Okay, I've gone, quarter mile. I only need to do 8 more of these, or then I'd go half mile. And then I'm doing math to keep myself busy,
Yes, absolutely. I do the same thing when I run, and it is rough. Okay. So other than that, are we still going to go out tonight? We got to figure something out, or you got something else? You got a better offer come along?
I do not have a better offer come along. So I'm ready to go out and do some brainstorming for our podcast. Sure.
I'm looking forward to that as well. Figure out how we can successfully wring some money out of these cheapskates that listen to us and get all this gold coming out of our mouths. And then
don't forget they can buy us a coffee for $5. So
yeah, maybe someday somebody will do that. We'll see.
Yeah.
We're not pushing it very hard, and so I'm not too disappointed that it's not happening, because I feel like in general, asking anybody for money, even to pay an invoice for work I've actually done, is never. It always has made me feel a little uncomfortable. I do it because it's the way it works, but it's still, you know what I mean? It's hard to value your own stuff as much as you value other people's stuff.
Right, exactly. And that being said, I found it to be beneficial in my life to have another person there to really kind of talk me up, provide my value, and really, be my advocate to collect the money for the work that I did. Right. So, I found that, and I do that for the other person. It's a lot easier to talk up that other person than it is for yourself. And that's been my workaround for that. And I've been fortunate to have some people in my life who've done that on my behalf, and I've turned around and done it for them. And, that's really, I think, probably an unspoken or not a very commonly realized benefit of having a business partner when you're going into a lot of these businesses. And I think more and more people these days are absolutely doing the entrepreneurial thing, having that flexibility, work from home a lot more now. Something to think about is partnering with somebody and not trying to just do everything on your own.
Yeah. I was looking at a meme not too long ago about mistakes entrepreneurs make. And one of the most common ones is not taking on a partner. And I mean, obviously taking on the wrong partner is pretty terrible, but all things being equal, you can find somebody whose strengths match up with your weaknesses. Boy, it sure does make things a lot easier.
Yeah. Now, That's similar to trying to find a nice partner, like for
Yeah.
romance, I mean, or is it more difficult, to find a good business partner? I feel that
Good
sometimes could
question.
be even, I'd like to talk to, bring somebody on and talk through that a little bit, just try to get understanding of, when you're creating any type of relationship, what are the things that we should be looking for? How do we find these people? How do we evaluate them properly and fairly?
Yeah, that's some advice I got from my minister when I was a kid in youth group, in my teens, and starting to have my brain come online when it came to girls and wanting to ask them out on dates and spend time with them, and how to figure out who I should ask out and who I should spend my time with. And he always used to say, it's more important to be the right person than to find the right person.
Oh, I like that. Now,
Yeah,
did he help you define what being the right person actually means?
Yes, quite a bit. He was, I lucked out with a very good, when I was in middle school, high school age. I had a great preacher at my little country church that I attended and that I was active in. And, he was a very holistic, minister, where there were no aspects of my life as a young youth in Polk County that he wasn't willing to offer advice and information on.
And looking back, do you feel most of that was helpful?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Would Renata agree?
Yes. she would agree. She would agree.
Good. I'm just busting.
I mean, I assume both of them would have some things to say about my implementation over the years of their advice. But I think they would agree with one another on the best way to move forward, for sure.
Great. No, that's good. That's good for sure.
So let's see what else is.
What else do you have?
Today's April 1st, which is one of my least favorite days of the year because of people trying to be funny on April Fool's Day.
And you're the only one allowed to be funny. Is that the issue here? I'm
the only one. It doesn't seem like I'm the only one allowed to be funny.
You're the only one that is funny. I gotcha. All right.
I've yet to meet a funny person who gets excited about April 1st and pulling pranks on their friends.
Yeah.
It's the worst holiday of the year, if you even want to call it that. Maybe the second worst after Star Wars Day, May the 4th. That's cheesy as hell too. And I really hate that one.
Yeah.
So these holidays for unfunny people, to set them up with a crutch where they get to think they're funny for a day. As a funny person, it deeply offends me.
Well, we'll need to work through that. We'll have a whole podcast on that.
Well, it's a rage I only experience twice a year if you count the other one. So
I love it. Rage.
Yeah, so I'm gonna hold on to my pain and rage about this particular issue and just live with it, because the only thing funny about this day is me yelling at people about how unfunny they are.
Oh man. Yeah.
So, what else is going on? We're gonna put our heads together about our podcast and the direction. We're definitely going to talk about our next book, because we're doing Rule 11 today, and we'll record a podcast on Rule 12, the best rule about petting cats that you meet on the street. That'll come on Monday. We'll record that one. Mm-hmm. And then free at last. Thank God Almighty, free at last. I love this book, and I am done talking about it.
Yeah, it's... And if anybody's actually listened to all of these podcasts for us, thank you. Absolutely, we'll do something special for you if you can prove in some way that you've actually listened to all 12 of these, because they've been tough. It's a tough book to listen to. It's a tough book to read, but he's got some underlying principles for each one of these. Each of the rules I think is very valuable, and Charles, as you brought to my attention too, you told me about this book, and I think there's a lot of great information here. I feel like it definitely needs to be cut in half or a quarter in terms of the number of examples that he gives. Yes. And then, okay, allow if you want to get deeper into it and you get a little bit more fluff than have all of this. But this rule 11, we're talking about where was it? Kids don't bother children while they're skateboarding.
Right.
I feel like this was kind of like the last opportunity for him to shove all of the rules that he left out of this book into this one chapter, because he veered all over the place. And even without chapter headings, like I was going through like the last half of this chapter, and I was like, oh, because we've been kind of skimming and looking at the chapter headings as it's broken out, and he doesn't break out this one section where he goes all over the place from and I was like, wow, it was rough. It was tough to digest.
I did the audio book of his following book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules. And geez, I cannot imagine what would have to happen for me to be ready to dive into a second Jordan Peterson book at this point. I am really looking forward, and you and I haven't settled exactly what we're going to do next, but it's going to be something short and it's going to be something practical. I can promise that.
Yeah.
Whatever we end up doing, it is not going to be a 400-page book on philosophy and history and psychology.
This was your doing, by the way. You chose.
I know. Yeah. This was all my fault. And again, I'm
address all hate mail to.
Yeah, exactly. Just send it to mindfullymasculine@gmail.com. I'll assume it's for me. That's fine. But yeah, it is. I find it to be a valuable book, but it is not an easy book. And like No More Mr. Nice Guy, there's little teeny bits of, I guess I would call it generational baggage that he sprinkles in here and there, where, I mean, he's an older guy than us and he sees the world a certain way. And sometimes there were a couple parts in this chapter that I probably will not remember when we're going through it that definitely feel like, I don't know, either generationally or politically, some of the bones are showing through a little bit about what he's about. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but it also, when it comes out in ways that don't feel completely necessary, it does make me groan a little bit. Like, I don't want to jump into the text in order yet, but the one thing that is occurring to me is, have you seen the movie Frozen, the Disney movie?
I have not.
Okay, I've seen it. I've seen both Frozen and Frozen 2. I like the original much better than the second one. And I feel like it's a very well-made movie, and the story is really entertaining, and it moves at a great pace, and I like it. I think it's, as kids movies go, and I don't watch a lot of them, I liked Frozen. I thought it was solid.
Okay.
And he refers to it as propagandist at some point, and I was like, because essentially, the heroine is a princess, and there's not really a prince involved in her hero's journey. It's pretty much just her and her sister.
Okay.
And so, when he addresses it in this chapter, it feels like I don't know, like,
in that he was also, I remember that section, and I remember he was comparing it to some of the other Disney movies, where the prince does come and save, Cinderella and Ariel and everything else, like, right. And so do you remember the differences? The reason why he brought up Frozen and was kind of comparing them to that, because I remember,
I think his message is kind of, in most hero stories, even when the hero is a heroine, it's a gal or a girl or a woman, to win the victory over the enemy. Usually what are considered traditionally masculine traits have to be employed for that victory to happen. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fairly accurate. There are certain traits that, certainly in the world of, fiction, myth, legend, there are certain traits that are throughout cultures more closely associated with male characters. And so I don't think it's a problem to refer to those as masculine traits. But I'm not sure
Yeah,
I'm not sure why he feels. So this is a middle of page 324. If you're looking for it, that's where the paragraph. It might be objected, as it was with Disney's more recent and deeply propagandistic Frozen, that a woman does not need a man to rescue her.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yep.
Deeply propaganda. I mean, this seems like, the same kind of thinking that has church groups getting together and burning Harry Potter books because it's related to sorcery and divination and things like that. It's like, I don't know. I don't remember anything hostile toward masculinity or hostile toward male characters in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just by the sheer fact that they change direction and they don't have a man involved with saving the main character, it's propagandistic. I mean, I don't know. It seems a little heavy-handed to me.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on, how much of an impact that word makes with you, right? So I think, there's, I guess the question is, to me, propagandistic is kind of the intent, right? So is the intent to send a message that women don't need men, or was the intent really to make an entertaining, slightly different story than what they've been making, right? Which is all of the other Disney movies where the man, where there's a prince that comes, and the reason why this one was so successful maybe was because it was slightly different than, it was a slightly different story than what the other ones typically followed.
Yeah, just because, a creative person, an author or, a writer, director, whatever, decides to make a story where in that particular story, yeah, the woman does not need a man. Mm-hmm. That's fine. And there's going to be some stories where a man doesn't need a woman. And there's going to be stories where all kinds of stories can happen, and people can find value in, I want to share this story. This feels like a unique take to me, without them, trying to poison our kids' minds for God knows what purpose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously it's Disney, so their purpose is to make money.
Correct. Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, I take that, that's Peterson's, opinion that it's, deeply propagandistic, so.
Yeah. And for me, propaganda is about, you're trying to accomplish a political goal through unclear or subversive means. You're basically trying to get something done without it looking like you're trying to get that thing done.
Right. I wouldn't say even political. I would say any message that you want to say, right? That is kind of, where you're not being, forthright about it. Yeah. It's propagandistic, I think. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And unless Disney is titling their movies, Walt Disney's Moneybag Part 3, that they're being propagandistic, because that's what all their movies are about. So I don't know. I feel, it just
Disney stock helper.
Exactly.
Part 3.
Part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I guess let's go ahead and dive in. We're 18 minutes in already, and at least we covered that part, so we don't have to revisit that.
Yeah.
But
so we got those 2 pages out of 200 for this chapter. Done.
Exactly. Yeah.
Check.
So I'm gonna take us through this pretty quickly. So just jump in and stop me when you want to expand on a point. But
I will.
Starting at the beginning. So the rule is, do not bother children when they are skateboarding, and if he just stuck with that theme throughout the whole thing, it would feel like, okay, yeah, I get it. I get what he's doing. But to back up his point, it really gets into the weeds. So the idea that I like at the beginning of the chapter is that, and I was with, I did a trip to Epcot earlier this week, and they've got a kids play area set up. And I was watching the kids play and seeing how they were playing and what they were doing.
Oh,
and I love this.
Is it weird that I want to go to a playground now? Would that be creepy without children?
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to, but I just want to watch them. I'll tell everybody I just want to watch. That's funny. I'm doing research for my podcast.
But it did remind me. That's great. It did remind me of this idea that if you make a playground too safe, kids just don't want to play on it, it seems completely intuitive, but I never realized that until I read it in this chapter.
Me too. Yep. I was like, wow, that absolutely makes sense. Cause I remember being on the playground as a kid. And sometimes when, things were a little safer, we'd find ways to make it less safe.
Yeah. Like you're not supposed to be on the roof of that playhouse. Like I know that's why I want to be there.
Yeah. But there's hot lava everywhere else. So you can't touch the ground. So you have to jump from one piece of equipment to the other. Right.
Yeah. So if you make up rules for kids that feels too safe for them, where they don't get to test their limits.
Right.
If you take that away from them, they'll figure out a way to test their limits.
I mean, I remember as a kid being on the seesaw, and it was like we'd pile on as many people as possible on both ends, and then we'd each kind of like hop off or whatever to see what would happen, and the thing was like slamming up and down, and kids were getting their legs caught under the, and it was all fun and games, and nobody lost an eye.
The thing that I used to get in trouble for all the time was at recess at my elementary school, going on the swing set and trying to swing as high as I could, and then jumping off the swing, like trying to get to the very top and then just flying off the top of the swing. And the teachers used to, like, whenever they caught me, they would say, "You can't do that. That's not allowed, blah, blah, blah. You won't be able to go out at recess." And every time I thought I could get away with it, I would try to get away with it. Because it made it more exciting. Let me see if there are some of the other parts of this section that I found.
On the swing set, I was always wondering if we could make it go high enough so it actually go all the way around.
Yes,
and
yes, and we would always tell the story of some kid who knew some kid that actually did it once. This urban legend of the kid that went all the way around.
I mean, I read somewhere, I wish I could, that, humans throughout history have always sought some sort of alternate mindset or alternate state of mind. And a lot of times that's been done through plants and herbs and mushrooms and but it's been shown to have happened even in ancient cultures. And one of the things they say is one of the theories is that it's an innate human desire to do that. And one of the things that they did to prove that idea was that if you look at kids on the playground, specifically on the swings, they'll dip their head back and they won't sit up straight. They'll just dip their head back and almost go horizontal. And the reason they said they do that is because it makes you feel high. You get this lightheaded feeling, and the kids enjoy that. Right. And so, I thought that was really interesting.
Did you ever play the game where you bend over at the waist and do some hyperventilating and then cross your arms over your chest and have your friend push you up against the wall?
No, I've never done that. I've seen people do that where they'll like grab them from behind or whatever and try to make them pass out. Yeah. That was I've seen sickos do that.
I did it to my friend Josh, my roommate Josh. I did it to him. I was probably around 21 or 22, and we saw it on TV or something. He's like, I kind of like to try that. I was like, let's go. And he did it. I pushed him against the wall, and he just dropped like a sack of potatoes. Wow. And he was on the ground, and he started twitching, and like he was maybe unconscious for 2 seconds at the most. But when he woke up, he thought he was out for hours.
Hey, man, that's like a good nap. I mean, for me, sometimes I'm like, I'll pass out. I'll wake up. I'm like 45 minutes. Holy cow. It seemed like 2. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was taking some Brazilian jiu-jitsu lessons, there were a couple times where I didn't tap out fast enough. So my coach put me to sleep. And that seems a lot less traumatic because you're already on the ground, number one. And all they're doing is just cutting the blood to your brain for a very short period of time, and then you go out and then you come right back up. And I never got a headache from it. I never found it painful or unpleasant. Never didn't turn into a kink, thankfully. That'd be rough. You'd be taking a lesson in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and be like, oh, I'm really into this. That would be awkward. But I found it neither here nor there, as they say. But that's the kind of stuff that just, guys in particular, like really all people, they want to try new stuff to see how different states can affect them. Yeah. And some of that includes danger and doing crazy things. I mean, geez, when I got my driver's license when I was 16, just the way I would drive around. Now I grew up, as I said, down in Polk County. and a lot of orange groves and a lot of bright red clay roads that go through those orange groves. And I would just take my 1984 Chevy Cavalier convertible under those roads and, just get up to 35, 40 miles an hour, cut the wheel and pull up the emergency brake and just see what happened.
He talks about that up in Canada, people spinning donuts on the ice, in parking lots, and that boys tended to do that a lot more than girls.
Oh yes, the girls that were occasionally riding with me, they seemed to enjoy it. They seemed to find it exciting, but it was never anything they did when they were the ones driving.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And gosh, it was. Yeah, when I think of some of those things, like the only really dangerous behavior I ever engaged in, because as I've said before, I was a bit of a sheltered little boy, a little bit of a goody two shoes. But man, when the thrill I would get from just driving like a maniac, going on some of these roads that had some hills late at night, out in the middle of nowhere with no streetlights, getting to the top of the hill and turning the headlights off. And it was crazy. I'm surprised I'm still alive.
Yeah. When do you think that phase is going to end for you?
I'm thinking 50s. I'm thinking, yeah, once I hit 50, I think
I know you've had some car trouble for the last year or two.
I'm gonna chill out when I hit 50.
It's a nice way to celebrate.
The most exciting thing I do now is drive my car in the path of a shopping cart so that it doesn't damage somebody else's car.
You're nuts.
That's about as crazy as it gets these days. Okay, let's talk about success and resentment. And I don't have a ton to say on this section, but I do have one observation that I thought was interesting, or it's really his observation, but my observation is me getting to say, oh, that's interesting. The idea that sometimes it feels like people who spend a lot of time talking about how unfair the world is toward poor people don't actually care about poor people. They just really hate rich people.
I thought that was fascinating. I never thought about it that way before.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. There's enough people on this little blue and green marble that every motivation for every action is probably represented out there.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
it does feel a bit easier. It's easier to hate rich people than it is to help poor people.
For sure.
It's easier to decide to hate any particular group and blame them for everybody's problems than it is to get your hands dirty and try to fix things, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's because it's much easier to just criticize something versus trying to come up with a solution, right? So inherently, I feel like if you care about another group, poor, rich, whoever that might be, in order for you to kind of express that you care about them, other than saying, I care about them, I think you tend to want to come up with ways to help, right? Or solutions to the problem. And that takes energy and time, and it's a lot of work. Whereas if you don't like something, it's really easy just to go, well, I don't like this or I don't like that. And it doesn't really, you can be justified, I think, in your own mind in terms of not liking them, because you can go, well, this is wrong, without having to really come up with a solution, which is a lot more work. So I think in general, disliking things is a lot easier in general than actually liking things.
Yeah. And, we as humans, we have a very strong impulse to rally around common enemies. And
for sure.
And that being true, I mean, look, just because we may have that tendency and it may be easier, that does not mean that people can't have legitimate criticisms against the wealthiest among us and how they get wealthy and how they maintain their wealth and things like that. There can be legitimate concerns about how wealth and income is distributed in both our system of economics and every other system. And that's kind of the thing that I find that people have a hard time, really taking in. The rich and powerful exploit the poor and weak in every system you can think of. That is how all of them work. Some of them are better at minimizing that than others, but pretty much that's going to be, there's good people out there, there's bad people out there. And when the bad people get into positions where they have resources and they have power, they're going to try to maintain that at the expense of other people. And, that's not a moral judgment. I'm not saying that humans are depraved or anything like that, but it's just kind of the status quo of how mammals allocate resources.
So help me understand your definition of exploit.
Okay. I would say that the people that are in positions to most effectively change or maintain a system will do so in their own favor at the expense of other people.
Okay. So the takeaway that I got from your statement was that there's no ability for somebody to get ahead without taking advantage of somebody else.
No. That is definitely not what I'm saying. I can understand how it would be interpreted that way.
Okay.
I would say that once you are either born into wealth and power, or you work your way up from nothing to wealth and power, you're going to have a very human drive to maintain that situation for yourself and your family. And it can be very tempting to do whatever you have to by whatever means necessary to maintain that for you and your family. And I would say, the higher you go up the hierarchy, the more control you have to rig the system so that you can stay that way.
Whoa, we got a lot to unpack there.
Okay.
System rigging. I feel, I think you're throwing out some blanket statements here that I'm having a hard time totally grasping my arms around and trying to get specific here, because
I mean, you and I both have what I would consider to be fairly libertarian leanings with our politics, and everything I said, I would say applies in systems of capitalism, of communism, of socialism, pretty much any way that humans have figured out how to spread out resources. The people at the top, whether that's, Lenin or the president of the United States or whoever, they're living no matter what they preach as their economic philosophy, they're living a life that's better than the majority of the people that they're in charge of.
For sure. But,
I mean, Karl Marx was no pauper.
Right. And so, yeah, I guess where my mind goes is to people who are, not necessarily political leaders, but, business leaders who have obtained obscene amounts of wealth, or a lot of wealth. I don't know, and I can't defend an argument that says they definitely didn't exploit anybody, right? Like Elon Musk. I don't know. I mean, he may have at some point, right?
He may have, he may not have. I mean,
right.
Whenever, and I'll play devil's advocate to my own position a little bit here. Whenever people start railing on billionaires, the name that I always bring up is, okay, how about J.K. Rowling? Who did she exploit? When she was living in her car and she was homeless and she started writing Harry Potter and she became the wealthiest British citizen, who did she screw over to get to the top?
Right. And so that's the thing is then do you think that, so she may not have directly screwed somebody over. However, I can see, I'm going to go ahead on and kind of support your argument now, right? Where she may have, in order to build her empire, right, and bring in all of that money, a lot of systems need to be put in place, right?
Correct.
So in terms of, creating the movies, creating the theme parks and stuff like that. So then do you blame J.K. Rowling for the worker, the janitor that works at the theme park that needs to work every holiday, or doesn't get enough time off, or works 80 hours a week, are they being exploited because of her, because it was her book and it was her. So at what point, is it her system that created those jobs of exploitation, right? Or those opportunities where people could be exploited if she had never created so I think it's a tough, it's a tough thing to kind of think about. So, yeah.
I mean, look, whenever there's, I mean, there, one of the most human problems that we all have to deal with is scarcity. Whether it's wants or needs, there's more wants and needs than there are things to fill wants and needs. And that's something that as humans, we have to understand that the resources that we have, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. Do we value those resources because they're scarce, or are they scarce because we value them? And it really, I guess, depends on the particular commodity of whether you're talking about diamonds or oil or clean water or whatever. Scarcity is a problem. There's not enough to go around when you factor in everything that everybody wants and everything that everybody needs. And so we develop economic systems to address scarcity and figure out, what can we do as humans to get what we need and share what we don't need with other people.
Yeah.
And I'm a pretty big fan of how capitalism does that in its purest form, where it doesn't include, the CEOs of corporations having a direct line to the White House to deal with, having laws and things written,
that's
and
not
tax codes written that benefit them.
And to me, that's not really capitalism, is it?
Correct.
Because then at that point, it's forced. I mean,
it's what most people refer to as crony capitalism.
Yeah.
And I would say it's a problem in this country, and it's a problem. It's worse in other countries. And, when I think of capitalism, I like the farmer's market. I like when a guy gets to grow his fruits and vegetables or his animals, and then every Sunday he takes them downtown and he shows off the work that he's done, and people get to hand him some money, and they get to take his fruits and vegetables away.
Yeah.
That's
I
what I love.
I mean, I'm going to go and say, we got to go back to the barter system, because that is really true value exchange for value exchange. Right. And it's like, and whereas, these CEOs that go to Washington, they get these bills passed, and where it actually, the laws, would favor them in some way, and the consequence for not following these laws is going to jail. So a lot of times, that's not, you're basically not, the value that you provide is now diluted, or it is not, as it's being propped up by force. And versus a true barter system is really, hey, is there value here in these fruits and vegetables for me? And is there value in having these paper, these paper dollars for you? And if it is, and we agree, then we make that trade, right? Versus being forced to buy, only organic, or being forced to buy stuff that is only made with pesticides, right?
Yeah, this is getting a little more political than I intended, but I think it's good stuff. And I'm not ashamed of my politics, and part of the reason that I can feel not ashamed is because I'm willing to change it frequently when better information comes my way.
Yeah.
But I feel like both business and government work best when it happens very close to the people involved. When you're trading with your neighbor, as opposed to, just ordering something on Amazon that was made in China and it gets to your house later today, which I love, and I do it every day. There's more room for nasty stuff to happen when you're that disconnected from the people that are manufacturing the things you need. And, when your government is on the other side of a continent or on the other side of a world, not to pick on Joe Biden specifically, but the quality of my life has very little impact on him. Like, the decisions he makes can have very big impact on me, and my rough day has zero impact on him.
Yeah.
And the problem is, these best models of government and of business, they don't scale to 400 million people. So we're trying to figure out how to make that work. And again, some parts of the world, they're trying communism, some parts they're trying socialism, some parts are trying capitalism. And everybody's trying to work out what is going to be the most sustainable and hopefully the most beneficial for the most people. But, in some cases, that's not what people care about. They don't care about doing this in a way that is equitable to everyone. And that's when you have, the peasants or the serfs eventually say, screw this. And they flip over the table with the board game on it and say, enough of this. I want to try something else.
Yeah. And it just goes to really, I mean, people are ignoring the fact, I think, when trying to have these one world governments, or even like you said, the government for 400 million people are so unique. We are all, we all have our own unique needs. A human being in general is so sophisticated in terms of not just our biological function, but the things that we think about. And now the information we have access to, thanks to the internet. So that now our minds are filled with information and ideas and things that we want to try. And to think that you're going to be able to create a set of rules for 400 million unique individuals is crazy to me. And to tell people you should live this way and you shouldn't live that way. And look, like you said, government as well as business, the closer you get to the people, the more it's going to be customized for you, the closer it's going to be to what your wants and needs are. Right. And as long as you're not, as long as you're, and I agree with that, as long as you're not, I'm a big fan of live and let live. You do you, what you want to do over there, as long as you're not impacting the welfare of other people or hurting other people, that's fine. And leave me alone to do what I want to do.
Right. And obviously, the challenge comes in to a country our size where we do want to say, and the principle of the founding was, the idea that each state could run its own experiment and try government the way that it wanted to. But we also do have to come together on some of the real big important stuff to say, okay, this is what every human being, due to either, God or the nature of humanity, deserves these protections and this minimum level of dignity. And then we spend 200 years arguing about what those minimum standards are and how best to implement them and things like that. So,
but that's, that's going to be a small set of standards, right? There's not going to be a whole lot, right? It's a handful at most in terms of some basic human needs in terms of protection and rights, human rights and things like that. It's not hundreds of thousands of laws that are required for that, which is what we're dealing with now.
Right. And it is funny, talking about what we started out talking about, how, it's much easier to criticize than it is to come up with solutions.
Here we go. Right.
I am completely out of my depth. I am not saying here's what we should do to fix this. I think that, as a matter of citizenship and patriotism, you got to be honest about our country's not perfect, and it's never going to be perfect, and it is going to be a lot better than some of the alternatives. But God, I feel like it's very important to have, whether you're talking about your relationship with your partner or the country that you live in, it's like, don't idealize anything. No. And don't and don't be so critical of everything that you say, there's no value in this whatsoever. Everything's terrible. Everything's awful, or everything's perfect. Both of those are delusions that don't help you move forward.
Right. And I'm certainly not saying that, but I think you did come up with a solution, which is what we started this talk about, which is bring things a little bit closer in terms of the government and our in business to the individual, right? Instead of moving, it's not a concrete solution, but I think I like, and I agree with you, which is instead of moving things to a larger group of people or trying to get a set of laws to larger groups of people, try to get a little bit more power and a little bit more things that will affect your day-to-day life closer to the individual, and having more, looking at local government, right? Doing business with local businesses, doing things like that, I feel help promote that philosophy. And I think of that as a solution.
I do. And I like the idea of all that. But again, the problem is scalability. How do you scale it out to, a whole country or a whole world? And then what do I do about, the $39 duvet cover that I want
Right.
Amazon to deliver today.
So listen, man. Yeah, I know you're getting right, and that's, again, nothing is perfect, and it's not a complete solution, sure, but that's something to, then that's the next thing to address, right? In an issue,
Right.
and Peterson actually talks about it himself, where he says he's got some left leaning philosophies, and he talks specifically about the redistribution of wealth, and he feels that the richer the individuals get, the more of a disparity there is of resources. And his philosophy is that that's not a good thing, and that there should be some redistribution of wealth. But he also admits that he doesn't know that we haven't figured out as a human species or society how to do that properly, how to redistribute that wealth. And so I agree with that. And he fully admits that he doesn't know that, but he believes it should be some redistribution.
Yeah, and one point that I've heard him make on interviews before, which I agree with, is no matter what you believe about income redistribution, or the economist Milton Friedman, who's I believe a Nobel Prize winner and a big figure in the late 70s, early 80s, very, very conservative sort of libertarian economist. And he believed in universal basic income that he called a reverse tax, where basically the poorest people, instead of paying taxes, they receive some taxes. And it's very interesting. There's some good videos of him talking about it on YouTube. And it's very interesting to me how political positions in this country can kind of shift back and forth. You just wait long enough, and what used to be a conservative position has now become a liberal position, and what used to be a liberal position has now become a conservative position. It's weird how that happens. And I think, with living in the information age, those swings are going to just happen faster and faster.
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody, my ex talked about that, the concept of the pendulum, and basically, the pendulum is everybody kind of swings to one side, to the left, and then next is to the right, and then it just kind of keeps going back and forth, just exactly what you said.
Yeah, I was listening to Adam Carolla was interviewing Bill Maher on his podcast earlier this week, and one of the things that Bill Maher said was, Bill Maher used to be considered the most liberal of the liberal.
Yeah.
And he said, you know what, in the last 20 years, I haven't really changed my opinion on anything. It's just all these new issues have popped up that didn't exist 20 years ago. And now some people don't think I'm on the right side of them. So I'm not a liberal anymore.
It's crazy. Right. But who defines who's a liberal? Like, you get a card, or conservative, right?
It's mostly the blue check marks on Twitter. That's pretty much
all right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
And someday I'll have one, and I'll be in charge too. Yeah. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about Peterson's friend, Chris. Oof.
Oh, yeah.
This is such a bummer. He brings him up in two different rules, and he just seems like a miserable guy who was born into what felt like to him a miserable world, and eventually he couldn't take it anymore, and he kills himself. And one of the questions in our workbook is like, why did this happen, essentially? And it's like, geez, who can answer that? I've known many people that have dealt with depression, and I've seen some people turn it around, and I've seen some people not turn it around, and for them, it was a fatal disease. And how do you know what it is that goes into the person that's able to turn it around versus the person who's not? I got no clue. It's sad, and it's rough to think about, but obviously if we ever figure that out, we can crack the code and help people. But
yeah, it's such a, again, we are so complicated in terms of the beings that we are, because we've got biological and genetic factors that will contribute to to depression, the environment that we grow up in, and then the experiences that we have, and then how do we interpret those, and who are our friends, and are they bringing us up or bringing us down? And I feel like, Peterson's book really is an homage to Chris, this whole book.
Yeah.
Because, I feel like he's kind of revealing things for us to be aware of as we go through our human experience. And just sometimes that awareness will say, hey, listen, either I'm not alone, or I can get support on this, or this is an issue, or this could be an issue. And that's kind of the takeaway that I'm getting out of his stories about Chris, is that Chris didn't have these rules explained to him. So, well, I'm not going to say this is succinct, but basically these were not there. And so I think part of Peterson's mission really that I'm taking away from this is to get this information out there so people can at least be aware that there is something to think about and evaluate yourself about before you make some horrible decisions like Chris did, and he ended up killing himself.
Yeah, permanent solutions to temporary problems are never the way to go, and that's exactly what suicide is.
Yeah.
One of the things, and he talks a lot about Chris's beliefs and worldview and the way that he kind of saw things. One of the ones that God just hurt me the most was he developed a deep hatred for masculinity and masculine activity. And man, when you hate something that you cannot separate from your identity, it's like, then you just hate yourself, and you feel like you can never escape that. I mean, it sounded like he kept, trying to, well, I don't want to say that. That's not accurate. I'm going to stop myself right there. So, the idea of, if I developed a deep hatred for brown hair, or, something that was, or brown eyes, just something that was part of me that, I guess the hair I could change, but there's certain things about yourself that you just can't change.
An incredible sense of humor. If you hated that, that would
same kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
When you hate part of who you are, how else can that end except in misery or suicide? That's rough.
Yeah. And then I think in that case, you really need to figure out, okay, well, is there a reason that I'm here, on this planet? Is there a reason, if you hate something about yourself, is, you hopefully you have some sort of exposure to something to say, there's a reason for me to understand and to maybe learn how to not hate it or how to tolerate it so I can go on. Maybe if there's no why, if you don't have a why in terms of why you're here on this planet, which is not an easy question to answer for most of us, right. I could see it very, turning into a snowball effect and going down this really dark path.
Yeah. I have a lot of empathy for people that struggle with that. Thankfully, that's never been my problem, or numbered among my problems, I should say. Depression. I've felt very bad because of negative circumstances, but I've never struggled with that feeling of things are terrible, they're not going to get better, and there's nothing I can do. And again, a lot of people that I've cared about have struggled with that, and the worst it got for me was just feeling completely powerless to do anything to help them, because you just can't. You can't talk somebody out of those feelings.
Yeah. And, I think Peterson kind of touches on this a little bit when he talks about aggressiveness, and that it is a kind of a built-in trait into human beings. And it is not something that is learned. It is something that is built into humans, just the way it is for hunger and thirst and procreation. He makes that point. And I feel like a lot of the points he also makes is that recently in society and culture, actually probably since the 70s, not even recently, that aggressiveness has been, I guess, demonized as a toxic male trait and part of toxic masculinity. And so I could see that contributing to Chris and saying, okay, these tendencies that I have of who I am, and I could see this happening with a lot of people, of being aggressive is one example. There are probably others that I just can't think of right now. And I hate that about myself, and there's nothing that I can do because it keeps coming up. So therefore, me and my identity, my very being, is flawed. And then, and I think Peterson talks about aggressiveness as it's not something to hate. It's natural, accept it, but control it. And it's kind of, for me, I kind of took it away as a little bit of a definition of being mindfully masculine is, we have these aggressive tendencies, but we need to know how to control them, unlike Will Smith. And basically, just not allow it to get out of control. And so that takes some thought, but also not feel that you're flawed for having these aggressive tendencies. He talks about how 2-year-old children, they steal toys, they kick, they bite, they scream, and they need to be taught how to handle those feelings and those emotions as they get a little bit older. And those that don't and aren't able to do that tend to be outcast, and they have other problems as they get older. And one of the things he talks about also is that leads to, for example, the Columbine killers, the mass murderers, because they were not able to, they were kind of outcast, and they didn't have this community around them. And if you can't control those feelings, nobody wants to be around you. Nobody wants to be your friend.
Yeah. And it's like we talked about recently about, the crazy dog at the dog park. As soon as you get him in that gate and let him loose, the other dogs will work with him, just by instinct to regulate his behavior and get him acting normal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. When you're a kid whose parents have let them do things that make them unlikable, then other kids don't want to hang out with them, then that social and emotional regulation might not happen. And then they're saddled with the difficulties of that for, the rest of their lives. Because I said it, I think in the intro to that episode about your kids are bumming me out, which that was a fun title.
Yeah. I like that one.
Yeah. Kids that are unlikable turn into adults that you roll your eyes at and walk away from when they come into the room. And that's a tough position to be in. I mean, I rarely feel that way, but occasionally, I may say something silly or inappropriate or whatever, and I get a little bit of that, what's the deal with that guy? And man, that is for me, especially as an extrovert, that is a tough feeling to live with. Oof. I did want to talk this section of boys into girls. Is it cool to jump into that?
Yeah.
He has a quote in here that says that there's basically a social constructionist theory that says boys should be socialized the way girls have been traditionally socialized, and they should be encouraged to develop socially positive qualities such as tenderness, sensitivity to feelings, nurturance, cooperative, and aesthetic appreciation. I agree with that 100%, as long as it doesn't happen at the expense of other more traditionally masculine traits that those boys are trying to figure out and live out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there is a spectrum. The more people you meet in your life, you're going to meet some fairly masculine women and you're going to meet some fairly feminine men. And I think, generally speaking, people should, I'm not generally speaking, across the board, people should be allowed to be the people that they are and that they want to be. I don't know that telling boys that tenderness, sensitivity, nurturance, and cooperative and aesthetic appreciation need to be avoided by any means. They need to be, those values need to be fostered in boys.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was trying to say that they shouldn't be what you just said, the masculinity, the masculine traits of pushing yourself and taking risks and being dangerous. It shouldn't be replaced by that. Correct. It should be supplemented by that. And I totally agree with that. And I feel like that's how you get the best of both worlds, is not removing one of them.
Yeah. And I want to live in a society where all people have the ability to connect to those feelings and those traits, because sometimes that's the most effective thing for us as individuals and as a community to move the ball forward. Right.
Yeah.
But again, the idea that I can't imagine being in a situation where I have a kid and either I or my partner is telling them, there's no place for these feelings. You have to have these feelings instead. It's like there's a place for every feeling, and you just have to figure out what that place is.
Yeah. Yeah. And right. And that figuring out of what that place is then will determine your actions and your reactions to those feelings. And I think that's important to recognize that as well, is to say you're not flawed for having these feelings. It's just, what are you going to do with them?
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's important to let people be the people that they are, regardless of their gender, and not try to downplay their traits and their tendencies, and just say, hey, look, as a member of society, here are the ways we channel these particular traits the most effective way to have a good life for you and a good life for the people you care about, and a better world for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah. And that was kind of a thing with No More Mr. Nice Guy too, where I don't think Peterson is as negative as Glover was with this idea of, we live in a world where it's not okay for a man to be a man. It's like, okay, you know what? It's, you and I talked about that episodes ago. It's like, I just don't see things that way. And whenever I hear guys start complaining about that, it's like, other people are not your problem. This mindset is your problem.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, okay, let's talk about, I don't know, the section on compassion as a vice. I can definitely understand where he's coming from with this idea that some people, I would say, I'm not one of them, will take so much pride in being agreeable and compassionate and empathetic and averse to conflict, that they will let people walk all over them and think that that's a virtue.
I mean, this is basically a summary of No More Mr. Nice Guy, right?
It is,
or one of the concepts.
Yeah, the idea that sacrifice at the expense of things you value, it's sacrifice is moral and virtuous when you give up something for something you value more, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But if you give up something you value more for something you value less, that is a form of sacrifice that I would say is immoral.
Need to unpack that. So I won't say it's necessarily immoral, but I would say it's dishonest for yourself if you are, you know what I'm saying? Because then I don't feel like you're really addressing your intentions. I think kind of comes back to like covert contract, right? It's kind of like it's like, well, I'm going to do this even though I really don't want to, but I'm hoping I'm going to get this out of that. So, that's how I take that.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, maybe immoral is a little strong.
It could be immoral, but yeah, I think it's definitely dishonest.
Yes. And we've talked about the person that lives a dishonest life where they're out of integrity and they're not open about what they want or what they need. That's not a happy person to be, nor is it a happy person to live with. Right. I mean, and that's where the back half of the section goes to, just the resentment that you build up by letting people walk all over you and having this attitude that you need to go along to get along and compromise to keep the peace at any cost. It turns you into a person that other people then have to live with in a way that is unpleasant, to say the least.
Yeah. And he doesn't pull any punches in this one line. He talks about this because there are only two major reasons for resentment: being taken advantage of, or allowing yourself to be taken advantage of, or whiny refusal to adopt responsibility and grow up.
Yeah.
If you're resentful, look for the reasons. Perhaps discuss this issue with someone you trust. Wow. I feel like he may have read No More Mr. Nice Guy before reading this chapter. It's very, very similar to what Glover talks about.
Yeah. The thing about resentment that just occurred to me while you were reading that is it never happens in a vacuum. You have to participate in the formation of resentment.
Okay, help me understand what you're saying.
Resentment only happens when you're unwilling to set or hold a boundary. And so if you're walking around with a heart full of resentment, you bear some responsibility for that, the creation of that resentment. It's not just about what people did to you. I would say resentment requires you to allow people to do things to you that you consider unfair.
Mm-hmm.
Because if people are doing things to you that are unfair and you're resisting and you're saying this is not okay, you're not going
to be resentful. I agree.
No, you're a victim and you're being taken advantage of or abused, whatever it is. But resentment is not the response that you'll feel to that. Resentment only happens when you're unwilling to say this is not okay.
Yeah. And resentment only happens, I think, when you don't say that this is not okay, right?
Yes, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah. And this is interesting because we talked about this too, is, somebody had, I don't remember who said this, but, by taking action relieves anxiety,
right?
Whereas thinking things through builds it, right? And so I feel what you had just said is a great way of thinking about this. Why resentment is so toxic is because it will just build anxiety, because you're not actually doing anything. You're keeping it inside. Right. You're not actually saying anything. You're not doing anything. You're not taking action. And that's just going to build up anxiety. Right. And so you can see a direct correlation here in terms of, now it's going to affect your health, because the higher anxiety levels you have, the more stress you're going to be under. You're going to choose unhealthy foods to relieve that anxiety, right? And it's a definition of comfort food, right? Make me feel better. I don't want to get rid of my anxiety. Comfort food is never, a lettuce wrap. It's stuff with usually that tastes good or lots of calories and stuff. So that's interesting. Lose weight by upholding your boundaries.
I like that. And I just thought of an equation here. And I'm writing in my book at the end of chapter 11.
E equals MC squared.
No.
Very brilliant, sir.
Thank you. Somebody already beat me to that one. Oh. How about this? Other people's actions plus your inaction equals resentment.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I like it.
Thanks.
It's great.
We'll put that on the bumper sticker.
Nice.
Okay. One last section that I wanted to ask you about. He kind of gets into the culture of, sort of blue collar workers and the, when he would show up at a job and deal with, what it was like to be the new guy, low man on the totem pole, and sort of a little bit of the hazing and the teasing that would happen as a result of that. Mm-hmm. I'd like to know a little bit about your experience as a member of a fraternity and what that was like for you, and, what kind of initiation and social hierarchies, because I've never experienced anything like that. And I'd be curious to know what it was like for you at Rutgers.
It's very much what he described in terms of that blue collar job. And I had a blue collar job. I worked in a kitchen through high school and part of college. Started out as in junior high as a dishwasher, kind of worked my way up. But it's interesting. I never thought about that, both being comparing the fraternity and the job, until you just mentioned that right now, actually. It's very similar, where you start out, you need to prove yourself, and basically you say, okay, and your limits will be pushed in different capacities. It will be mental, emotional, physical sometimes. It depends on, the fraternity that you're in will depend on, what that looks like, those tests look like. Sure. And that way, and a lot of times, you do get to the point of where you break a little bit, or you show your weakness or your vulnerability or your boundaries. And at that point, depending on the people that you're with, they may lay off, or they might just, they might continue. Fortunately, the fraternity I was in, it was relatively mild compared to the stereotypical Greek thoughts of hazing and things like that.
Right.
But these were all, I wasn't forced to do these things, right? I was not held at gunpoint to do these things. I could have walked away at any time I wanted and not have been physically harmed or restrained or anything. But I chose because I saw the value of the members of the fraternity, of the connections and what I could benefit from being in that fraternity. And also didn't mind pushing myself a little bit and finding out what those values were and those my limits were, because I was like, oh, here's a challenge for me. And it wasn't just to show them, or, that, and same thing when I was starting out as a dishwasher, we got called nicknames and we were made fun of and teased and stuff like that, and sometimes we were made to, scrub stuff, that we didn't need to scrub. So for me, it was interesting to see where my boundaries were and accept those challenges. And so I got to know myself a little bit better as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really, one of the difficulties I feel like men have in modern society is the lack of initiation. And we don't have really any kind of a formalized cultural standard for how we move boys from boyhood to manhood. And as a result, we've got a lot of 40 and 50-year-old boys running around acting like boys.
Yeah.
Focusing on the things that boys enjoy, boys have interest in, and not really any kind of, most of the men I meet, even just in casual interactions, I would say the guys that I'm friends with are pretty deep guys. And is that because I only see their depth when we become close, or is it because I'm only drawn to guys that have that depth? Probably a little bit of both, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And so it's something to kind of go back on what I was talking about as well, is after you accomplished that thing or whatever that challenge was, there's usually some sort of celebration or closeness that or bond that was created between you and sometimes the people who were putting you through that, or the people that you were going through it with, right? Our for example, our pledge class. I mean, I'm still tight with all of those guys, years and years later, because of our shared challenges and the things that we overcame, as well as our failures. We didn't, we didn't succeed at everything. And sometimes that, and so that creates experiences, emotional connections, and through that a level of trust where, I could call one of these guys up and go, dude, I'm in trouble. And they'd be right there. And, if you don't have those challenging experiences in life with other people or for yourself, then I feel like, you're kind of missing out. And I mean, tribal cultures have been having these rituals in terms of, they sound brutal sometimes, but of that they take the boys away from the moms and they go out into the jungle and for example, some of them or the desert and perform these rituals and make them go through these challenges, and when they come back, they're a man. Right. And I mean, and even, the Jewish religion, right. I mean, the bat mitzvah and the bar mitzvah, they have similar type of rituals. And I feel like it's part of human culture to say, okay, this is, to always challenge yourself. And then this is the ending of you as a child. And this is the beginning of you as an adult.
Yeah. And I feel
very valuable.
I think it's extremely valuable. And I think to say, oh, we don't need that anymore because now we're modern. I think we're losing something very important. And especially when you consider the absence of fathers in our culture, and the lack of initiation, the lack of contact that young boys have with what used to be considered like the village elders. It's like, no wonder so many kids turn to gangs and turn to like
initiations, rituals, right? With gangs and stuff like that. So here's a question for you. Yeah. If there was more of a universal or type of ritual for men to take responsibility for transforming their sons into men or taking them to the next level, do you think there'd be less fatherless children? Do you think fathers would stick around more to do that because they had that sense of obligation, or because I feel like then as as an older person, you're getting value out of that too, because you're sharing some of your wisdom, your experience. You're now responsible, a little bit more responsible for another human being in their development and their growth. And I think that there'd be a little bit less single parents around.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, if men did adopt this idea of, I am not going to make a child until I have the ability to guide him or her through childhood to adulthood, whether that would be, based on mental health or financial resources or whatever. It's hard. I'm not trying to be judgmental, like, how dare you guys do X, Y, or Z, but we all do live with the consequences when we have a set of incentives that do not encourage men to stick around and help their daughters become women and their sons become men.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, that I'm ready to put rule number 11 to bed. How about you?
I do want to just touch on a little part at the end. He kind of sums up the chapter here a little bit in terms of, healthy women. If they're healthy, women don't want boys. They want men. They want someone to contend with, someone to grapple with. If they're tough, they want someone tougher. If they're smart, they want someone smarter. They desire someone who brings to the table something they can't already provide. This often makes it hard for tough, smart, attractive women to find mates. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think in general that is absolutely true. Really, regardless of gender, nobody wants somebody that they think is beneath them. We all kind of want to be with somebody that, at least in certain areas, we feel like, oh yeah, I caught a good one. You know what I mean?
Same thing for me. I've written out a list of characteristics I look for in an ideal partner. And one of them is that, they challenge me in some ways, that they can teach me something. Right. Yeah. And so that I'm, smarter than, or that they're, smarter than me in some areas. It doesn't have to be everything, but again, if you're with someone who, beneath you is, that it could be taken in a lot of different ways. Yeah, but that's true. I want somebody that, I can learn from and enjoys teaching, and for something. And it's obviously it'd be something that I need to be interested in, but I agree.
Yeah, that's a very good characteristic. I don't have that on my list. Mine are all I have the list as well. As you know, we sort of worked on those together. Mine are all much more shallow than yours.
Not at all.
Because I'm the worst person.
Stop it. Not at all.
I put a lot of work into that list, and I'm very proud of it. And the fact that it took me a long time. So basically, this is a 5 and 5 list that's recommended by Dr. Robert Glover, who wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy. And he also wrote another book called Dating Essentials for Men. And in that book, Dating Essentials for Men, he says, put together a list of 5 things that you cannot tolerate, 5 essentially for you negative characteristics in a partner, and then 5 positive characteristics that you absolutely have to have. And make that list and work on that list and put a ton of effort into that list, and then decide if the person you were when you made that list is trustworthy. And if so, hold to that list and even share it with the people that you're considering, entering into a long-term relationship with. And I've had that conversation. I've shared that list fairly recently. And it is it's different. It's a different conversation than any other conversation you probably ever had in your life if you do it.
In what way?
I guess it feels like there is an implication of, I expect you to measure up to this or else. Ideally you handle that in a way that doesn't seem judgmental. It seems more like, for my own health and for me to live the best life that I'm capable of, I figured out these things about myself that I need to see these things in my partner, or I can't tolerate these things in my partner. And so it would be a mistake for both of us to get into this relationship if you're not on board with this list, essentially.
It's absolutely a tough conversation, because a lot of that, and I know from my own experiences, that is sometimes kept to ourselves as covert, not contracts, but just hidden type of standards that if we don't express them to the other person, it's not fair to us or them, because then they're not even aware that they're being compared to these standards,
right,
that sometimes we have even we have tough time putting together and not making them vague and making them specific. So by putting together this list, it's great because it helps you be very specific in figuring out exactly what you want. And I feel that's going to be a important foundation for moving forward with any type of relationship.
Yeah, and certainly a relationship where you envision a future with that person. I mean, if you're just meeting somebody for casual dating, then it probably doesn't matter so much. But if you're thinking of spending a significant amount of time with this person, building a family with this person, then I would say, every person, because I shared my 5 and 7, mine's 5 and 7 because I refuse to follow the rules. My 5 and 7 list with a gal pal of mine, and I talked about making the list, I talked about having the list, and she was like, can I see what's on the list? And I was like, absolutely. And I sent it to her, and she was very positive about it. She's like, yeah, I need to make one of these, because she voiced some concern with she kept having relationships kind of stall in the talking phase before it would move to commitment, and she felt, the impression I got from her was she felt some responsibility that maybe she was making some bad choices in potential partners. And a list like this can certainly catalyze that process to say, okay, I'm not going to approach getting in deep with somebody until they know about this list and until we can have a conversation about what they do or do not, match up with.
Oh, that's great. Did she share that with you yet?
Her list? No.
Okay. I'm just curious. Yeah.
No, I next time I talk to her, maybe I'll ask her about that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
See if she put it together.
So I know we've been doing some takeaways recently in some of these chapters.
Yes.
I have one for this. I'm happy to talk about, but I wanted to ask you, do you have something?
I had one occur to me while we were talking today. And so while you do yours, instead of paying attention to you, I'm going to try to page back through and find the one that popped into my head that I then didn't make a note of. So,
okay. Yeah, no, normally it's just like par for the course. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking about what I'm going to say instead of what you're actually saying.
Perfect.
Exactly. And that's why what I say is it comes out so well. I spend so much time thinking about it.
Yeah. That's the secret to this success. A Secret of My Success. Do you remember that movie? Michael J. Fox?
I do. Michael J. Fox.
That was
Absolutely.
great. That was a great movie.
Yes.
One of my favorites. And I should take that back. Not one of my favorites, but it was a fond memory. So basically what Peterson ends his chapter talking about, no one aiming at moving up would allow him or herself to become possessed by such a thing, such as, basically, negative consciousness. And he talks about, if you think tough men are dangerous, meaning people who can be a little bit aggressive, wait until you see what weak men are capable of. And to me, somebody who doesn't have an idea of what they want and have the strength to communicate that is an example of a weak man or a weak person. And so my takeaway from this is I'm going to kind of combine this with Glover's idea of doing a list here is in any important relationship in your life, it doesn't have to be just romantic. It could be a business partner, right? And maybe you and I should do this for each other is make a list, a 5 and 5 list for that relationship as well. So I'm going to challenge each of our listeners, figure out an important relationship that's important to you now and in your future, and put together a 5 and 5 list, a list of things that you want and that you would love to have, and then a list of things that are non-negotiables, or red flags, or things that if you saw that is not the type of relationship you want, that's not the person you want to have in that type of relationship, right? So like a business relationship, it would be, somebody who's honest, somebody who's proactive, would be on the green flag list. The red flag list
Right.
would be, perhaps could be opposite of that, but somebody who, is late to events and meetings, things like that. So I would say, let's do that. Let's put together a 5 and 5 for an important relationship in your life.
I like that. Let's see. I think the one I'm going to go with, this is going to be a tough one. It'll be a lot less work than yours, but it might be more difficult to do.
Solve world hunger.
Exactly. Yeah. World peace.
Yeah.
So we're still doing 2 of these a week. So this is going to come out on either a Monday or a Thursday. I'm not sure which one, but whenever you hear this, within the next week, have a conversation with someone where you tell them something they did that bothered you, and try to live in that moment, and don't apologize your way out of it, and don't justify it. Just tell them what they did that bothered you and how you worked through it, how it made you feel, well, how you felt as a result of it. I got to be careful with that making you feel thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I that's what I like. I like the idea of saying, just have one of those uncomfortable conversations that you normally wouldn't have with somebody, and be honest and own your feelings, and don't try to back off of it.
I like that. And it doesn't have to be a huge deal. I mean, I think it's great because you're helping people do the difficult work of being honest, getting used to having difficult conversations, right? And in the end, you're going to be improving communication and understanding between two people. So I really like that idea.
I do too. I'm glad I came up with it, and I just regret the fact that now I have to do it. Speaking of things I have to do, last episode we talked about a statement, a one sentence, one phrase way that you can introduce yourself at a party 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
I do.
And it felt like you already had one pretty much like ready to go as soon as I brought it up. And I've thought about it this week, and I'm going to steal probably part of yours. But I'm going to go a little more specific. I'm going to say 10 years from now, I want to be able to say, hey, I'm Charles, and I am a dad, and I am an advocate for men's health.
Nice. I like it.
And yours was just like that, except without the fatherhood, correct?
Correct.
All right. I'll think of something else I want you to be in addition to an advocate for men's health. And then maybe a dog owner. I think I'd like to see you be a full-time dog owner in the next 10 years.
I will absolutely be a dog owner. That's not cool. A question. That's yeah. I mean, if that counts enough to say that in the statement, then yeah, dog owner and
I mean, it only counts it only counts if you're passionate enough about it that you would tell somebody that.
Oh, absolutely.
So maybe that might be a little crazy.
No, I mean, advocate for kindness to animals and
there you go.
For sure.
Yeah, I like that.
So
I'm a member of a militia based in Montana. There could be some weird ones, but I think I've pretty much decided that I want a family, and so ladies, send a headshot to mindfullymasculine@gmail.com,
and also your 23andMe genetic profile,
obviously, IQ results,
absolutely.
So no, I don't need any of those things. I'm fine. Keep those to yourself. Send them to Dan. Just send them to the email address, and I'll forward them all to Dan.
Charles has an FIQ for both of you, so don't worry about that part.
Yeah, at least I think I do, right? I certainly act that way. Okay, well, this was a hoot. 90 minutes later, we're finally done with this. We could have just hit the play button on Audible and just let them listen to the whole thing. No, not quite.
Not at all. No way, man.
It came in over 2 hours. So One more chapter left, and it's the best one, the most important one, I'm going to say. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. And this embodies my life philosophy.
Yeah.
Because I'm Charles, and I'm a crazy cat guy.
Yeah. And ironically, Peterson talks about that he doesn't own a cat. He owns a dog. So he's a dog owner. So it's interesting,
that tracks with me. He's kind of emotional, kind of soft compared to a man like me, where I can tolerate the push-pull relationship of a cat, and he seems like he would need the constant adoration and love of a dog. No offense. No offense to you dog people out there, but toughen up.
Yeah, we are a sensitive bunch. So all right, Charles, this was great. And hopefully we haven't tortured too many people, and they'll hang out for Rule 12 next week.
Yeah, feel free to pause this one halfway through and come back to it, because I almost did in the middle of recording it, so you're allowed to when you listen to it. All right, Dan, thanks. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon, and we'll hang out tonight.
Sounds good. All right, man.
All right,
bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for spending time with us on the Mindfully Masculine podcast. If you liked the episode, or you think it would be useful for someone else, please leave us a review and join the Mindfully Masculine group on Facebook. Remember, fellas, don't act masculine, be masculine.